There we go. 9:33. There we go. Some people running late this morning, which I usually do. Welcome to our Bible study this morning. We're going to continue our theme of Old Testament events and characters and stories that many of us have heard from times when we were little. Today we're going to talk about the 40 years of wanderings that the children of Israel got themselves into. And I want you to, as we go through this, I want you to think of some things that we should learn from this. I've got some, and I want to see other thoughts that y'all think about, and that just things that we should learn from about this event as we study it. Prayer request. Okay.
For sure, she passed away officially Thursday or Friday.
Okay. They have not set a date yet for a funeral for her granddaughter, and organs are being donated, which is a good thing. So.
Her husband finally told her they could donate her eyes.
Okay.
But the rest of it, she had been saying that her whole life she wanted to donate her body when she died.
Not a bad thing.
And Howard and I have been married 2 years when I met that. She was 2 years old when Howard and I got married.
Okay.
One thing about Howard and I, that was another husband. I got husbands everywhere.
I'll not repeat that for the audience. So, for our visual audience, so let's just let that one pass. What else? Who else?
Remember the flood victims.
The flood victims, certainly in the southeast part of our country. Many tales of tragedy, and I'll bring up something after we pray. Anybody else? Stephen Moore. Pray that Stephen will be able to endure the pain, and pray for healing for him for his arm. Very well. Anyone else? Would you offer a prayer for us?
Lord, we're so thankful for this opportunity to be together this morning as your believing children. Just thank you for this special day of the week that means so much to us, and we can assemble here and fellowship with one another, and most of all, to worship you and know the truth of what you are. Lord, we just thankful for this time of life. Thank you for Steve and his ability to spiritually and physically be with him and Kathy. We expect them to always stay strong in the faith. We're so thankful he's willing to share his knowledge with us this morning. Pray, Lord, that you be with those folks in the mission this morning. And with Danny's granddaughter, her family especially. And thank you for the life that you live. Just pray that you'll be with her family and strengthen them in this time of sorrow. Lord, as be with Stephen and Lord, I just pray that you'll help him to heal soon, and that you can help him endure the pain and fellowship with the power. We pray that you'll restore his Philip and Stephen to be back in the field safely. Lord, we pray that you'll be with others and lead our prayers this morning. We're so thankful indeed for your healing, your power, and your mercy and your grace. Just be with us as we study your word. This we pray in your Son's name.
Amen. As I've studied this lesson and the events of few days ago with all the flooding, it came to mind the flood. And we've read accounts and throughout many days of hurricanes and flooding and catastrophes going on, how some people were rescued and some people were lost. No real rhyme or reason as to what the circumstances or who. I've heard of difficult rescues. I've heard of very simple rescues, about people drowning. But think about what the people were going through when the flood came. And it started raining, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and the underground waters opened up and engulfed the earth. We think, okay, if we get 3 or 4 inches of water, it's terrible. Streets are flooded, we can't get through, we can't get in or out of our homes or places of business, we can't go places, we can't do things. But we expect the water to stop rising. When it rains, we expect it to stop. Those people, it didn't. And the water kept getting higher and higher. Now, I don't know, we have no hills around here. So there wouldn't be many places that we could evacuate to or go to try to get past the rising waters. People in the hurricane last week or week before last now, were climbing into their second floor and into their attics and then on the roofs, and the roofs caved in and got swept away. The whole house got swept away sometimes. There was no escape for some of them, but for the people that were living during the flood, before the flood, all except for 8 souls, 8 people. There was no higher ground for any of them. The only higher ground was the ark, and it was sealed. Then we are prefaced with today's lesson of the 40 years of wanderings when Moses and the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea on dry land. There's an area, that's a huge area that we're talking about. The Red Sea, let me just read what I came up with. I can read it better than I can. The Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea not only finalized God's redemption of his people from slavery in Egypt, but it also prefigured the greater spiritual reality of God's redemption of his people from slavery to sin through the work of Christ. The Red Sea separates the coast of Egypt, Sudan, and Eritrea to the west from those of Saudi Arabia and Yemen to the east. Its maximum width is 190 miles. That's here to Lubbock. Its greatest depth, 9,974 feet, and its area approximately 174,000 square miles. The Gulf of Suez, the northern end of the Red Sea, is roughly where Moses and the children and the Israelites are said to have crossed the Gulf of Suez. It's the northwest arm of the Red Sea between Africa proper west and Sinai Peninsula to the east of Egypt. The length of the gulf from its mouth at the Strait of Jubal, and that's at the very top up there where you see Ramses. The length of the gulf from the mouth at the Strait of Jubal to its head at the city of Suez is 195 miles, again, about the distance from here to Lubbock. And it varies in width from 12 to 20 miles, and it's 230 feet deep. A lot of people over the years have estimated that, well, it was only just like what we think a little creek or a brook or a little stream, and you could walk across and water only up to your ankles. We don't find that to be true. We find no place in the Gulf where it was that shallow. So when and if it was, God wouldn't have had to have parted the Red Sea. But he did through a mighty wind. And then he dried the ground so that they walked through, and we're talking 600,000 to over 1 million people, plus cattle and sheep and possessions and wagons and whatever else that they could carry, going through on dry land with a wall of water on either side. And then we all know the story. They were being pursued by the Egyptians. The Egyptians came through. The wall of water came back. The wind stopped. God stopped the water. And the Egyptian army was engulfed in water. Think about all those soldiers that were drowning. Now, I don't know what it's like to drown because I've never drowned, and I don't want to. But just imagine what was going through all those Egyptian soldiers as that water engulfed them. And people drown in bathtubs. Think about 230, even 100 feet of water that you can't survive and won't survive.
Steve, I've been to the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and one place where you walk through is where you're walking through the Red Sea, and the water, I mean, they've got walls of water way high, and you're just walking through there. It's kind of a strange feeling.
Could be a little scary feeling. Walking through the Museum of the Bible in D.C., where this is exhibited to some extent with water on each side, and you're walking through, and that's a good exhibition, I would think. Maybe I can hope to see that one day. What got the children of Israel into this? Well, let me start. You've got the layout of the land from the map, best you can. What got the people to this point? We remember the story of Moses. A famine that was happening to God's children at that time. Jacob and his family were in the midst of a famine. So Egypt had been prospered, and Joseph ended up second in command over the country, found favor with the king. And they had plenty of food, So Jacob's family, sons, headed to Egypt to buy food. Well, and as the story goes, then Joseph found them, and they found Joseph, and made up, and everything was good, so they brought the family down. Well, people die and people were born, so the children of Israel grew in Egypt to a pretty mighty family, and got a new king. The children of Israel didn't find favor with the king and enslaved them. So murmurings and probably prayers and just over a period of time, God heard these murmurings and said, okay, I'm going to get you out of there. Called Moses to come in and be their leader. Moses did. But just like today, people are not happy with what God gives you. And so in the midst of trying to get out, God hardened Pharaoh's heart and caused the 10 plagues. And finally, the king says, go, get out of here.
400 years they were in Egypt?
Yes, yes.
About 70 went up there to start with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's close to the numbers that I saw. Yeah.
Now they multiplied to millions.
Yep, yep.
Sorry about this.
No, and anytime you got anything, interject. So the Pharaoh says, go, get out of here after the killing of all the firstborn. And so they're released. Now they're crossing the Red Sea. The people, are they happy? No. They told Moses, why didn't you just leave us in Egypt if we were going to be killed? We'd rather die there than die at the hands of the Egyptian army. But God had told them, I'm going to bring you to the land of, what's the two words? Milk and honey. Exactly. What comes to your mind when you hear milk and honey? And is it good? It's very good, yes. But they don't, for whatever reason, even after seeing the 10 plagues, which were miracles, they don't trust God. They don't believe God. And goes back to my first slide of without faith, it's impossible to please God. Read Hebrews 11:6 sometime and really think about all that it says. That's a whole lesson in itself. But they didn't believe God again. We're going to be killed. So what does God do? God leads them across on dry land, gets them over to a safe place, and then kills the Egyptian army by collapsing the Red Sea on the army. Another miracle. Another proof of power that God has. And another proof that God is truthful. God means what He tells us. God meant what He told them. And so they're headed to the land of milk and honey. A lot of things happen, but they end up getting close, and upon their arrival at Kadesh Barnea, which bordered the promised land of Canaan, they sent out 12 spies to survey the land and its people. We find this in Numbers 13, and that's where most of our study today will be. And they explored for 40 days, and then they came back. And what happened? So even though they brought back grapes that they had to carry on a stick, the cluster was that big. They brought back other fruits. They brought back some idea of what the land was like. But what was the problem that the spies didn't like? The giants, the nations, the people that was in this promised land, they thought that you can't overcome them. But who's on their side? God. God had told them, I'm going to give you this land. Now, you may have to work at it. You may have to do some things, but the land's going to be yours. But again, they don't believe. Numbers 13:27. Let's turn over there. Starting in 25, Numbers 13, verse 25. When they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregations of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Thus they told him and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large, and moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Ammonites are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are living by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong for us. So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone in spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. There we also saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. Creates fear in a mob, a huge mass of people. So, what does the mass of the people do? Come on with the story. They say, we can't take this land. It's impossible. There was 10 for, 10 against, and 2 for. So they start grumbling, say, we can't do this. Why didn't Jehovah leave us in Egypt? Here we've come all this distance, been promised all this, seen all these miracles, and this includes water being supplied from where? Rocks. Now, a rock is a solid mass. And I don't know of too many rocks that has plenty of water in it. Now, yeah, you see the waterfalls come down and things like that, but God poured water out of a rock for his people. Another miracle. They were hungry, so he supplied a manna and quail. Still weren't happy, still grumbled. Now he's brought them almost to this promised land. We can't do this. Why did you bring us here? Why did you get us this far? Only to die at the hands of other nations. What's wrong with these people? Stubbornness, unbelief, no faith, not believing God's going to hold his promises and do what he says he's going to do. How is it different today?
Majority today. Sorry.
You said exactly what I wanted to say. The majority of the people today saying the same thing. Brothers and sisters, we can't let that happen. We can't lose our faith in God. We can't, no matter what happens, ever lose our faith and our understanding that God is a God of promises and God keeps his promises. Chapter 14 of Numbers. And y'all be thinking now, what do we want to learn? What lessons do we want to learn from all this? See how much time I got. Okay. Chapter 14, the people rebel. Then all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. All the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Better be careful what you ask for. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt. Okay, Moses is out. Moses is no good. Find somebody else and let's turn back. How were they going to cross the Red Sea? Did they ever think about that? How were they going to get back? They didn't have compasses back then. What was guiding the children of Israel? Cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. You reject God, the cloud and the pillar of fire is gone. Did they have a map? I doubt it. They didn't even think things through. They didn't think about what they were asking for. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces in the presence of all the assembly of the congregation of the sons of Egypt. Verse 6 of 14. Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephthah, I mispronounced that, of those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. Joshua and Caleb were that angry, were that frustrated, were that put out with the group that they actually tore their clothes. They were so upset. And spoke, verse 7, and they spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Could you have said it any better? That's pretty plain language. But did the people listen? No. Because we know we're smarter than God. We know better. We're God's children. We can do anything except this. Verse 10, but all the congregation said to stone them with stones. Think about getting that mad over just words. Same things happen today. But the people were so mad, they wanted to kill them right there. Stone them to death. Thus the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. You've made Jehovah mad. Through your arrogance, through your lack of faith, through your forgetting all that I've done for you, through bringing you to this point, and you've seen all the miracles that I've done, but yet you still lack faith. Why? I don't know. I hadn't been able to figure it out, and probably won't. Verse 11, the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people spurn me? How long will this people spurn me? You think God's saying the same thing about some of us? And how long will they not believe in me, despite all of the signs which I have performed in their midst? It's not like us today that we have to believe the scriptures based on our faith of what happened. These people were there. They saw the miracles firsthand, were part of the miracles. Think about all the plagues back in Egypt that they had gone through. And it was like somebody drew a line that on the Egyptian side, the plagues happened. Where the children of Israel lived, nothing going on. It was that stark. The firstborn of the Egyptians died. The firstborn of the children of Israel didn't. Now you take somebody's firstborn child, that's pretty severe. But yet the people didn't believe. They didn't have the faith. Verse 12, I will smite them with pestilence and dispossess them, and I will make you into a nation greater and mightier than they. Now this is God, Jehovah God, talking to Moses. I'm going to get rid of all these people, and I'm going to make a great nation through you. What would you do if God said that to you? Would you say, yes, I knew it. I've got it in me. Thank you, God. Let's get rid of all these people and start anew, start fresh, and I can do it. Moses was one of the most humble people that ever lived. Moses didn't say that. What did he do? He pled for the people. Verse 13, Then the Egyptians will hear of it, for by your strength you brought up these people from their midst, and they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land. They have heard that you, O Lord, are in the midst of this people, for you, O Lord, are seen eye to eye, while your cloud stands over them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and in a pillar of fire by night. Drop down to verse 19 or 18. The Lord is slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness. Slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generations. Pardon, I pray, the iniquity of this people according to the greatness of your loving kindness, just as you also have forgiven this people from Egypt even until now. We all know the rest of the story. Jehovah God says, okay, I'll let you continue, but nobody over the age of 20 will enter into the promised land except who? Joshua and Caleb.
By the way, John Wayne
I don't disagree with that.
How many people died and how many funerals they had in 20 years?
40. 40 years. Yeah. Well, probably close to 1 million. So God says you're going to wonder. 40 years.
40 years is quite a span, really.
Well,
You can think of that.
it is till you get past 40. And you look back and you think, and then when you hit 50 or 60 or 70 and even past, then you look back and think, well, 40 years, yeah, I could do this. But God's saying, no, you won't. I'm not going to let you. And thus, the rest of the story, as far as they wandered for 40 years when they didn't have to, and nobody, including Moses, got to enter the promised land except Joshua and Caleb, and they became a great nation and everything. They overwhelmed all the armies and the enemies, and things were good. The land did not come without work, but when you've got God on your side, even the hardest things are not that hard in comparison to what it is without God. So what's some of your lessons learned? Don't be afraid to speak up. I've got 7 up here. God loves his children, but we must obey.
Even after they didn't, Zion going in and taking over the country, he still protected them.
He did.
He still took care of them after he decided to destroy them. He went on ahead and still took care of them, and they were able to survive through that wilderness.
If we don't obey God, what should we expect? Reward? Punishment. Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commands. Don't expect love if you're not obeying. We got to remember God doesn't work in our time frames. we're instant people. We want it now. God don't work like that. God could have killed all these people, 1 million, let's just say in round numbers, instantly or in a very short time. Many, he caused a plague and many died then, short time. But the rest, God wanted them to understand disobedience and made them wander for 40 years so that the people 20 and under would still have a chance to occupy the land. God doesn't always work if we demand. We should ask and be thankful for everything we get. We can ask whatever we want in prayer, and should. But if we don't get it like we want it, don't be mad at God. We have a hard time understanding that. We have a hard time dealing with that. God has patience for us. We have to have patience for Him. You get that? God doesn't work in our time frame. God works in His. And God is patient with us. Why are we not patient with Him? We must. God's ways are not always our ways of having something happen or making something happen. God thinks of things and comes up with ways of doing things that I would never think about. We tend to overlook the small blessings, but we shouldn't. Even the smallest blessing is a blessing. We don't look at it like that. We think that we got to have the biggest and bestest. No. If we can get something to allow us to survive, live, prosper, those are all blessings. And another one I thought of that I didn't put down, God sometimes tends to work just in time. Remember the lesson of the manna. It would not last past one day. They had to prepare it. They had to do whatever that they did with it, because by nighttime, and eat it, by nighttime it was spoiled. God gave them enough for how many days? 1 day's sustenance. On the Sabbath, for the Sabbath, 2 days. But again, just in time. Now, we can pray for stuff far away or in the future. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't, but we may not always get it right then. And we just have to wait on God. And what's God's 3 answers? Yes, no, maybe, or not right now. Thank you for the class.